The problematic prince. Stop, stop the wagon. The shouts of a maid called out. As soon as the startled coachman stopped the carriage, Erna and her maid burst out and made their way to the neatly trimmed grass. The coachman didn't know what was going on until Erna fell to her knees and started throwing up into the bushes. Water, fetch water, the maid called back to the coachman. He jumped down from the driver's seat with a canteen in hand. The maid snatched it up and gave it to Erna, who didn't get back to her feet until she had rinsed her mouth out several times. Please drive carefully. I feel like I am on a cloud, Erna said, climbing back into the carriage. The coachman nodded obediently and took up the reins again, urging the horses to go careful and slow back to the palace. Lisa propped a pillow for Erna and watched the scenery slowly drift by. As warmth came back to her hands and feet, Erna felt a little better. Are you all right? Lisa asked. Ever since the Shia tea with the Princess of Lars, Erna's complexion had looked pale and was deteriorating all the time. Lisa, I don't know what's going on, Erna muttered. It's this place, Your Highness. Everyone in the royal family is crazy. If we go crazy, we can do it together. It'll be more pleasant that way, Lisa said, adding another cushion. Lisa didn't know what happened in the greenhouse, but Erna must have done the right thing. It's not wrong to bite back at the dogs of Lars, even as they try to nip at your ankles. I believe the head maid is conspiring with the princess. If not, then this really is a messy coincidence, Lisa said, her eyes looking at Erna with ponderous thought. You can't wait. You must let His Highness know right away. No, Lisa, Erna said with a shake of her head. What happened at the lakeside must remain a secret, please. Taking up Lisa's hand, Erna pleaded with her maid. Aren't you upset? I'm upset. Then why? Because I am so upset. Lisa didn't understand. She thought that if you were upset and it was caused by someone else, then you have to fight. Even if it meant rolling around in the mud, pulling your hair out, you have to fight and fight to win. But Lisa couldn't go against Erna, not when the woman looked at her with the big, blue eyes. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa returned Erna's smile and looked out the window. Not too far away, she could see Manster Palace come into view. The Lars villa she so desperately wanted to get away from. Karen paced about the palace halls with an unusually jittery gait. She was powerless to do anything to help the princess, and she couldn't stand still knowing the Grand Duchess would be back soon. Bjorn never raised his voice, not once. He didn't even show the slightest hint of anger, and somehow, that made it worse. Bjorn had looked at her for so long, in absolute silence, until he touched Erna's notebook and suddenly Karen lost all composure and collapsed. Karen knew what was in that notebook. She had been by the Grand Duchess' side whenever she wrote in it, which is why she knew what Bjorn was pointing at. It was always difficult to conduct any social gatherings without the influence of Princess Gladys and the royal family as a whole. Their family was so interlaced within Lars, it was difficult not to create a few rifts between acquaintances. Karen had left out all those details, of course, because she wanted the Grand Duchess to be left outside, on her own. Bjorn picked up the notebook and flicked the pages casually. Of these two, which one is better? He put it down again as if he had been considering the menu. I'm sorry, Your Highness. I wasn't good enough, Karen pleaded. Bjorn leaned forward over his desk and steepled his fingers before his chin. Unwilling to raise her head, Karen stared down at the floor. Fetch me a cup of tea, please, was all he said. They had been standing in the Grand Duchess' bedroom for a long time. She left without a word, and when she got out into the hallway, she slumped onto the floor. She was numb and thought that if she was to ever be in that situation again, she would not be so lucky. Just as the sunlight started to turn red, the Grand Duchess returned. Hearing the horse hoofs, Karen ran to the front door. Erna looked at her as she climbed out of the carriage. How was your walk around the lake, Your Highness? Karen said. Yes, Erna said thoughtfully. It was rather pleasant. Thank you for suggesting it. Karen's eyes went wide with fear as Erna smiled faintly, passing the maid without so much as glancing at Karen. Was it because Princess Gladys never showed up? Karen thought. Karen followed after the Grand Duchess, keeping her eyes on the back of the woman, looking for some clue as to what happened. The hope she had was quickly dispelled. She could instinctively tell what happened at the lake just by the way the Grand Duchess was presenting herself. She seemed confident, almost arrogant. Most people had written Erna off as a naive country bumpkin, but the more Karen got to know the Grand Duchess, the more she saw that was not true. Well, Your Highness, the prince has returned, Karen said. She decided that it was best to play her role for now. Erna's eyes widened in surprise and she looked out the window, expecting it to be dark already, but it was not. Erna cleared her throat. Bjorn? She said to herself. Yes, Your Highness. He said he came home early due to schedule cancellation. Should I get dinner prepared for the both of you? Erna didn't answer right away. She was overjoyed that Bjorn had come home already, but she was still feeling the effects of her tea with Gladys. She didn't know if she could handle food right now. Yes, Erna snapped. Please prepare dinner. Erna's bedroom was empty. She said she was going to retire early after dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Bjorn looked about the room carefully and leaned on the back of the chair that had been nearly tucked under the writing desk. The notebook still lay upon it. Foolish girl. Bjorn fingered through the pages of the notebook again and looked at the elegant scrawl. At the back, Erna had segregated the pages to show families she could be friends with and families she could not, based on their support of Princess Gladys. All the families were under Princess Gladys, and on her side was written one simple little thing. There is no place for me so long as Princess Gladys remains. Bjorn understood Karen's influence on that one page alone. Erna, none the wiser, worked hard with a bright smile. Just as he was thinking about throwing the notebook into the fire, the door opened and Erna came in looking pale. Are you sick? Bjorn asked her. No, I don't think so, Erna said, approaching him. Her smile seemed to revive her a little, but when she saw Bjorn's hand resting on the notebook, her face became fierce, like an angry cat. Why are you looking at that? It's private, Erna shouted, snatching up the notebook. Bjorn was faster and stood tall, holding the notebook high above his head. He skipped around the room out of Erna's reach. Bjorn, this is not gentlemanly of you at all. Erna glared at him with eyes full of resentment. It's not a secret diary, is it? No, but it's still mine. It's rude to read it without my permission. Erna pouted. Bjorn's lips tilted sharply up into a mischievous grin as he looked down at his wife, who looked dejected. You're such a smart girl for coming up with such a clever little chart. What do you mean? Who do you plan on socializing with, your maid? The squirrels? What a mess. Bjorn laughed. Too late he realized he had gone too far when Erna went stiff and looked hurt. I don't know what you think, but I tried really hard. Erna said. It sounded like she was close to tears. Erna clenched her fists and stepped away, toward the window. What a mess. The sarcastic remark scratched at her heart like shards of glass. It felt like her stomach was being stabbed again. Erna, Bjorn said softly. The voice calling her name did nothing to stir her from staring down at her feet, wringing the hem of her dress in balled-up fists. Don't cry, she thought to herself. Keep your pride, don't cry. Her eyes were hot, but maybe because of her will, the tears did not come. At the moment she wanted to turn around, Bjorn's hands were already around her waist. She wanted to pull away, but Bjorn pulled her in close and comforted her with a hug. He sat her down in the chair of the writing desk, and just as she was determined to stand back up again, she was surprised to see Bjorn grab another chair and sit down opposite her. He took off his jacket and undid his cuffs. "What are you doing?" Erna said. "Take this," Bjorn said. He offered Erna his fountain pen. Erna looked at it as if it was going to bite her and took her own pen from the writing desk. Bjorn opened up the notebook to the offending page and pointed. "Move them," he said, pointing to a few names. These 3 families, move them across to your column." Erna struck a line across the page. But the 3 families in question were considered to be the closest relatives of Princess Gladys, according to Karen. "That's right. But why?" Erna said, fiddling with the pen. "Are they people of character?" "Almost. They are people who have already spent my money." As always, there was something in Bjorn's response that caught Erna off guard, which he gave quietly. Erna's new education went well into the night. When Bjorn pointed to a name, Erna moved it across and Bjorn went into deep explanation about the family, using concise words easy for Erna to understand. When Bjorn had finished and put down his pen, Erna closed the lid of the inkwell and looked at her new notes. It was a crazy mess of lines and small words, but it was looking a lot more well-rounded. Erna had more than a few names in her column now. "You can learn the details from Karen. I've already spoken with her," Bjorn said. It was something she wasn't sure about, but Erna nodded her head deeply. Before she knew it, her old wounds faded, and she was filled with excitement. Her heart did not stop pounding easily. "Thank you," Erna said. She found it hard to lift her head again, to look at her husband. It wasn't like earlier, when she was filled with anger toward him for snooping through her things. "I will work hard and do my best," said Erna shyly. "That's my Erna," Bjorn said as he brushed her cheek and gently raised her head. "When you talk to someone, you should be looking at them." His voice was cool and soft. It permeated an energy that warmed Erna and filled her with laughter. "Just like your favorite saying, ladylike," Bjorn stated. His lips were bent into a cozy smile. Erna enjoyed this moment, seeing that smile on his face. Bjorn always wore a loaded smile, but this time, his smile was different. "Is it better for you and Lichen if I remain quiet and doing nothing while we are in Lars?" He nodded. "Then after, when we leave Lars for the other countries, I will work just as hard and do well. Is that all right?" Bjorn nodded again. "Are you going to be as busy?" "Why?" "So that we can actually do things together. It's my first time traveling anywhere in my life." Erna closed her eyes and smiled shyly. "What do you want to do? Will you join me if I tell you?" "We will see." It was not a definitive answer, but Erna's face lit up with excitement. "First, I just want to go for a walk with you. A street or a park in a foreign country would be so wonderful." Bjorn was a little relieved that this was the most exciting thing Erna could think of. He nodded and accepted. "I would love to find someone where to eat together and drink tea, too, in a pretty place." "Is that all?" "What?" The excitement on Erna's face paused for a second. "Is that all you want to do?" And Erna struggled to think of something wild and exciting. "Let's talk a lot, intimately." Bjorn didn't see the value in her thoughtful wishes, but he was willing to give in to them. "Fine." He heaved a sigh and gently caressed Erna's cheek. "Let's do it." Erna looked at him, and her eyes lit up. Like a flower opening its petals, her grin brightened the room. Very pure and pleasing to the eye. Erna's letter came along with the first snows. Receiving the letter from the maid, Baroness Baden hurriedly found her glasses and sat in the armchair in front of the fireplace. Mrs. Grieve, who received word of the letter's arrival, came into the drawing room also. "You have no idea how warm my heart is at hearing Erna is doing so well," the Baroness said, handing the letter to Mrs. Grieve when she finished. The strange sense of incongruity was no longer present, and the letter felt more Erna-like. It was more so when they had moved on from Lars. It was said that they would be moving on to yet another country by the year's end. "My lady," She really has fallen into her role as the Grand Duchess, Mrs. Grieve said, returning the letter. Erna talked about the strangeness of the world in her letters, and Baroness Baden soaked up all the information as the maid poured her tea. That was a nice change that came with her granddaughter being the Grand Duchess. Baroness Baden had refused the extra staff, but it was hard to refuse the stubbornness of the royal family. The repairs to the mansion, which had begun at the moment the marriage was announced, were already completed, and the number of servants increased dramatically. Ralph Royce, who had been a coachman in name only, finally had a beautiful wagon with which to work his magic on. The mansion was turned from a run-down, dusty house to a beautiful country estate, and it was all thanks to Erna. Her birthday is in a few days. Will she be able to celebrate properly in a foreign country? Mrs. Grieve said. Erna now has the most reliable family in the world. She will have a very special 20th birthday. I do hope so. The two old ladies looked out the window at the slowly falling snow. It was the same window they would look out of as Erna built the biggest snowman for her grandmother and grandfather. The prince was a habitual offender. He played the caring husband when he wanted to, but mostly he acted like he completely forgot his wife existed, just like today. The prince is such a good husband, Lisa said sarcastically. She had gotten so used to saying it, she wasn't even aware she kept doing it. She figured there was no man alive that enjoyed the same freedom as Prince Bjorn. Huh? What did you say? Erna was busy poring over tourist brochures for the city they were in. She looked up briefly to give Lisa a smile. She did not look unfortunate, like a Grand Duchess that had to enjoy her honeymoon with her maid, because that's what she was right then. Nothing, Lisa said. When the tea they ordered came, Erna put down the booklet. The hotel's tea room was famous for its fancy china and colorful confectionery, and it was presented exactly how it was shown in the booklet. She had planned on having tea with Bjorn this morning, but last night's card game went far into the early hours of the morning, and by the time the Grand Duke returned to his bedchamber, he was blind drunk and Erna was about to get up to get ready for breakfast. Oh my, it looks so pretty. How can I be expected to eat it? Lisa said. She should feel sad that Erna is having to have tea with her maid, rather than her husband, but the cakes made Lisa forget all about her feelings of annoyance at the Grand Duke. Eat as much as you want, Erna said. Lisa paused, reaching for a brightly colored lemon slice. Something in Erna's words felt threatening, and Lisa was unsure if the Grand Duchess meant for Lisa to scoff down all the cakes, knowing what a sweet angel she was. All day that had been following Erna's plan as diligently as they could, spinning a web all across the city, stopping only to enjoy the little things she spotted on their meticulously planned out tour. She was so different to Bjorn, who was lazy and insensitive. It was not such a loud laugh that made every eye in the tea room turn to look at her. The other visitors couldn't take their eyes off Erna because she looked so beautiful, not that Erna noticed. Lisa wondered why Erna wanted to visit a place known as the Sewer Museum. She supposed it didn't matter, so long as the Grand Duchess enjoyed it. It might be because they were going to have to sail to get to the museum. Lisa thought about the look on Prince Bjorn's face when he finds out that his wife's itinerary ended with a visit to the sewers. "Your Highness, why are those people standing in line like that?" asked Lisa. There was a long line of people going past the display window of the tea room. It went all the way down the street and around the side of the large building. "They are going to climb to the top of the dome of that cathedral there," Erna said, pointing. The cathedral stood diagonally from the hotel tea room, and on its top was a large golden dome. Lisa could see tiny little dots walking around it. The cathedral was built 200 years ago and built by the Queen when she was to get married to the Prince of Lichen. It is said, if you go to the top with your loved one when the bell rings, that love will last forever. When the cathedral was built, The royal couple of Filia did the very same. Erna spoke like she had lived in the city for years. She had studied up on Filia as soon as she found out she was going to be visiting on her honeymoon. It was also the biggest reason she was looking forward to coming here. Oh, my, then you should be going with Prince Bjorn, not me. Erna looked up at the dome and nodded. Yes, I will. She had already made plans to do so when they laid together in bed on the boat over to Filia. It would be her birthday in 10 days, and she didn't want her 20th birthday to go unnoticed after getting marred to Prince Bjorn. He had agreed to climb the cathedral with her, and Erna felt embarrassed after worrying so much about being rejected. It was hard to show joy at that moment, with Bjorn moving so roughly. It was a romantic conversation shared with such a barbaric situation. Looking back on the last 3 months, Bjorn was always more willing to do things when asked during their love-making. Should she remind him of his promise? After thinking about it for a moment, it was a promise made with sincerity as they looked into each other's eyes. He even gave her his sweetest smile. There is the chance that he could have forgotten his wife's birthday, though. Shall we go? Erna said, after examining the clean plates in front of them. Erna gave a smile that would light up the sewers of Filia. Erna was coming. The sound of her footsteps alone would have been a gentle whisper, but she came with her maid. The busy pace went right up to the door. There was a gently knock at the same time as the door opening. She was such a strange and obstinate lady who would enter without permission and display pointless manners when doing so. Bjorn, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Erna spotted him on the couch, in front of the fireplace, reading a magazine. He folded it up and looked at her. She was in a green velvet dress, with ribbons and frills. She looked like yet another gift box today. Did your guests leave on their own feet? Erna looked around the room slowly, asking the sharp question with a soft smile. Well, maybe. What a relief. I thought they might have stumbled out on all fours, she said sarcastically. Bjorn chuckled as he tossed the magazine on the table and moved his leg off the sofa. Erna quickly seized the free seat and sat down next to Bjorn. Bjorn, I went on a boat trip today through the sewer museum. What? Bjorn couldn't believe what he just heard. The sewage museum, you didn't know? I went there this afternoon. It was amazing. Did you know there is a huge network of big, long, complicated tunnels right under our feet? It was just like that novel I read about the main guy escaping through the tunnels. While Bjorn was marveling at the fact that someone thought it was a good idea to make a museum for such a thing, Erna continued to recite all the mysteries she had learned from her trip. I took a boat ride and the guide taught me how to find things that fell down drains. She seemed particularly proud of that. And then you came back here, from the sewers? Bjorn inched his way along the couch, opening the gap between them. His perfect little gift box was a sewer adventurer. Erna watched him shift away and wrinkled her nose. What are you doing? Do you think I went swimming in the sewers or something? Is that what you think, you? The one who broke his promise and went off to get drunk and play cards? Erna shifted along the sofa after Bjorn, closing the gap he had just created. Each time he moved, Erna would too, until she was practically sitting on his lap. Bjorn laughed as he let himself fall off the end of the couch, wrapping his hands around Erna's waist and dragging her with him. She still smelled of sweet flowers. Your hat looks sad, Bjorn said, removing her cumbersome hat and tossing it onto the table. I don't think it was meant for the sewers. He removed her cape from around her shoulders and started rolling up her dress. Erna laid quietly on his body and gasped when she felt his hands on her garter belt. Can't you just look at me for a second? Erna said, grabbing his wrist. Lisa worked really hard on this dress. But you're prettiest when you're naked. Bjorn unwound the garter belt very carefully. Erna was not very appreciative of the compliment. Oh my God, Bjorn, you say such insulting things. How would you feel if I said that to you? Erna fired him an angry glance. "Don't tell me." Erna hurriedly placed her hand over her husband's slightly parted lips. "No, don't answer." Bjorn kept quiet as she'd hoped, but his silence was much filthier than the answer she'd tried to block.